Imagine standing on a military training ground, watching a woman who has just missed 11 consecutive shots. The targets seem impossible, the distance overwhelming. Seasoned soldiers shake their heads. Whispers of doubt fill the air. Even the commanding general begins to question whether this experiment was a mistake. But sometimes the greatest victories come from the deepest failures. Sometimes, when everyone expects you to quit, that's exactly when you discover what you're truly capable of. What happened next on that dusty range would rewrite military history, challenge every assumption about human potential, and leave a four-star general speechless. This is the true story of Maria Santos, the woman who turned failure into legend with one impossible shot that defied physics, logic, and every expert who said it couldn't be done. Get ready for a journey that proves miracles aren't just possible. They're waiting for the right moment to unfold. The morning sun cast long shadows across the military training facility as Maria Santos stepped out of the transport vehicle. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the unfamiliar weight of the military uniform on her shoulders. At 24 years old, she had never imagined herself in this position, surrounded by concrete buildings, obstacle courses, and the distant sound of gunfire from the practice ranges. Maria came from a small farming town in rural Texas, where the biggest excitement was usually the annual county fair. Her father, Roberto Santos, owned a modest ranch where they raised cattle and grew corn. Her mother, Elena, worked as a school teacher in the local elementary school. They were hardworking people who believed in simple values: honesty, persistence, and treating everyone with respect. Growing up, Maria had always been different from the other girls in her town. While her classmates spent their afternoons at cheerleading practice or shopping at the local mall, Maria preferred to help her father with ranch work. She learned to fix fences, drive tractors, and handle livestock with a calm confidence that impressed even the experienced ranch hands who sometimes worked for her family. But it was her relationship with her grandfather, Miguel Santos, that truly shaped who she would become. Miguel was a World War II veteran who had served in the Pacific Theater. Every evening after dinner, he would sit on the front porch of their farmhouse, sharing stories of his military service while teaching Maria about discipline, courage, and never giving up when things got difficult. Miguel had noticed something special about Maria when she was just 8 years old. During a family camping trip, he watched her throw rocks at tin cans with an accuracy that seemed almost supernatural. While her cousins missed their targets completely, Maria hit can after can with stones she picked up from the ground. Her hand-eye coordination was remarkable, but more importantly, she had an ability to stay calm under pressure that Miguel recognized from his days in combat. As Maria grew older, Miguel began teaching her more advanced skills. He showed her how to use an old hunting rifle that had belonged to his father. Under his patient guidance, Maria learned the fundamentals of marksmanship: breathing control, sight alignment, trigger squeeze, and follow-through. What surprised Miguel most was how naturally these skills came to his granddaughter. While most beginners struggled with the basics for months, Maria seemed to understand the principles instinctively. By the time Maria was 16, she could outshoot most of the experienced hunters in their county. Word spread quickly through their small community about the teenager who never missed her target. Local shooting competitions became routine victories for Maria, but she never boasted about her abilities. Her grandfather had taught her that true skill was demonstrated through actions, not words. The financial crisis that hit their family came without warning. A severe drought destroyed most of their crops, and several of their cattle died from a disease that spread through the region. The medical bills from her mother's unexpected surgery added to their mounting debt. The bank threatened to foreclose on their ranch, the only home Maria had ever known. Her parents tried to hide their financial struggles from Maria, but she could see the worry in their eyes during family dinners that became quieter and more tense with each passing week. Her father worked longer hours, taking on additional jobs in neighboring towns. Her mother returned to work earlier than her doctor recommended, still recovering from her surgery, but desperate to help save their family's future. Maria knew she had to do something to help, but options were limited for a young woman in their small town. The local jobs paid minimum wage and offered no real hope of earning enough money to make a significant difference. College seemed impossible without financial aid, and her grades, while decent, weren't exceptional enough to earn substantial scholarships. It was during this difficult period that Maria first learned about the military's new experimental program. A television news report mentioned that all branches of the armed forces were actively recruiting women for specialized roles that had previously been limited to men. The reporter explained that the military was particularly interested in individuals with exceptional marksmanship abilities, regardless of their gender or background. The news report specifically mentioned that selected candidates would receive signing bonuses, comprehensive training, full medical coverage for their families, and opportunities for rapid advancement based on performance rather than traditional qualifications. For Maria, who had spent months watching her parents struggle with impossible financial burdens, the program seemed like an answer to their prayers. That evening, Maria approached her grandfather about the possibility of military service. Miguel listened carefully as she explained her reasoning and her desire to help their family. He was quiet for a long time, looking out across the ranch land that might soon belong to someone else if their financial situation didn't improve. Finally, Miguel spoke about his own military experience and the lessons he had learned about service, sacrifice, and personal responsibility. He told Maria that the military would be difficult, demanding, and sometimes dangerous. But he also acknowledged that it could provide opportunities that simply didn't exist in their small town. Most importantly, he assured her that whatever decision she made, he would support her completely. Maria's parents were initially resistant to the idea of their daughter joining the military. They worried about her safety and wondered if there might be other solutions to their financial problems. But as weeks passed and their situation became more desperate, they began to understand that Maria's military service might represent their family's best hope for survival. The application process was more complex than Maria had expected. She needed to complete extensive paperwork, undergo medical examinations, and participate in multiple interviews with military recruiters. Each step of the process reinforced her determination to succeed, not just for herself, but for her entire family. When Maria received notification that she had been accepted into the experimental marksmanship program, the relief in her household was immediate and overwhelming. The signing bonus alone would be enough to prevent foreclosure on their ranch, and her military salary would provide ongoing support for her parents and their medical expenses. The night before Maria left for basic training, her grandfather gave her his most treasured possession, the Purple Heart Medal he had earned during his service in World War II. He told her that the medal represented not just his own courage, but the courage of everyone who had served before her. He wanted her to carry it as a reminder that she came from a family of fighters who never surrendered, no matter how difficult the circumstances became. As Maria stood outside the military training facility on her first day, feeling nervous and uncertain about what lay ahead, she touched the medal in her pocket and remembered her grandfather's words. She thought about her parents, working extra shifts to support her decision. She thought about the ranch that would remain in their family because of her choice. Most importantly, she thought about the opportunity to prove that a small-town girl could accomplish extraordinary things when motivated by love for her family and faith in her own abilities. The training facility was intimidating, filled with equipment and technology that Maria had never seen before. The other recruits seemed more confident, more experienced, more prepared for what was coming. Many of them came from military families or had previous experience with advanced firearms. Some had college degrees or specialized training that Maria lacked. But as Maria walked toward the administrative building to begin her military career, she carried with her something that couldn't be taught in any classroom or inherited from any family tradition. She possessed an unshakable determination to succeed, fueled by love for her family, and guided by the values her grandfather had instilled in her over years of patient teaching. The journey that would eventually lead to her legendary 4,000-meter shot began with a simple step through the entrance of the training facility. Maria Santos, the daughter of struggling ranchers, was about to discover that sometimes the most extraordinary destinies begin with the most ordinary people who refuse to accept limitations others try to place on them. Her story was just beginning, and the world was about to learn what happens when natural talent meets desperate determination and unwavering family values. The 11 failures that would nearly end her military career before it truly started were still weeks away. But so was the impossible shot that would make her a legend. As Maria disappeared through the doors of the training facility, she had no idea that she was about to embark on a journey that would challenge everything she believed about herself and redefine what others believed was humanly possible. The small-town girl with steady hands and an unbreakable spirit was about to become something much more significant than anyone, including herself, could have imagined. The alarm clock's harsh buzzing pierced the darkness at 0500 hours, jolting Maria from a restless sleep. Around her, 32 other female recruits stumbled from their narrow bunks in the cramped barracks, beginning another day of what their drill instructor called character building through controlled suffering. Maria had been at Fort Benning for 6 weeks, and every morning still felt like a shock to her system. Sergeant First Class Jennifer Iron Fist Morrison stood at the front of the barracks, her voice cutting through the groans and complaints of the awakening recruits. Morrison was a 15-year veteran who had served 3 tours in Afghanistan and earned a reputation as one of the military's most effective training instructors. She was also participating in the experimental program, tasked with preparing female recruits for roles that had traditionally been closed to women. Ladies, you have exactly 4 minutes to be standing in formation outside this building, properly dressed and ready for physical training, Morrison announced. Anyone who is late will be explaining their time management skills to me personally while performing additional exercises that I promise you will not enjoy. Maria had learned during her first week that Morrison's threats were never empty. The sergeant possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of punitive exercises and a creative imagination for combining them in ways that tested both physical endurance and mental resilience. More importantly, Morrison had made it clear that she expected every recruit in her platoon to exceed the standards traditionally applied to male soldiers. The physical training regimen was unlike anything Maria had experienced during her ranch work. While farming had built her practical strength and endurance, military conditioning demanded a different kind of toughness. The daily routine included 5-mile runs, obstacle courses designed to simulate combat conditions, strength training with equipment that pushed every muscle group to its limits, and combat drills that lasted for hours under the Georgia sun. Maria discovered that her rural background provided some advantages over recruits who came from urban environments. Years of manual labor had given her calloused hands that didn't blister during rope climbing exercises. Her experience with physical work in all weather conditions helped her adapt to training that continued regardless of rain, heat, or humidity. Most importantly, her familiarity with discomfort and persistence helped her push through moments when other recruits want to quit. But the physical challenges were only part of the basic training experience. The academic requirements were equally demanding, covering topics that ranged from military history and protocol to advanced communications technology and battlefield tactics. Maria spent her evenings studying subjects that were completely foreign to her rural education: electronics, advanced mathematics, strategic planning, and international law. The marksmanship training component of the program was where Maria expected to excel, given her extensive experience with firearms under her grandfather's guidance. However, she quickly discovered that military shooting requirements were far more complex than hunting rifles and tin cans. The weapons were heavier, more sophisticated, and designed for scenarios that demanded split-second accuracy under extreme pressure. Sergeant Morrison introduced the recruits to the M24 sniper weapon system, explaining that this rifle would be their primary tool throughout the specialized training program. The weapon was significantly heavier than the hunting rifle Maria had used on her family's ranch, and its advanced optic system required completely different techniques for target acquisition and range estimation. This rifle is capable of accurate fire at distances exceeding 800 meters, Morrison explained during their first marksmanship session. However, the weapon is only as effective as the soldier using it. Your job is to become worthy of this equipment, and I assure you that will require every ounce of dedication you can possibly summon. The initial marksmanship training began with basic familiarization, disassembly, cleaning, reassembly, and dry firing exercises. Maria's hands moved confidently through these procedures, drawing on years of experience maintaining her grandfather's hunting rifle. But when the recruits progressed to live-fire exercises, Maria encountered her first significant challenge. The military shooting positions were different from the informal stances she had used during hunting expeditions. The prone position required precise body alignment to ensure stability and accuracy. The sitting position demanded flexibility and strength that Maria was still developing. The standing position, used for rapid engagement scenarios, required balance and muscle control that could only be developed through countless hours of practice. During her first week of live-fire training, Maria's performance was mediocre. She hit her targets consistently, but her groupings were larger than those of several other recruits who had previous military experience or formal competitive shooting backgrounds. For someone who had been considered exceptional in her hometown, this average performance was both frustrating and humbling. Sergeant Morrison noticed Maria's disappointment after a particularly challenging shooting session. Instead of offering empty encouragement, Morrison provided brutally honest feedback that would prove crucial to Maria's development as a marksman. "Santos, you're thinking like a hunter instead of a soldier," Morrison explained. "Hunting requires patience and a single perfect shot. Military marksmanship requires rapid target acquisition, multiple engagements, and maintaining accuracy while under physical and psychological stress. You need to rebuild your shooting foundation from the ground up." The rebuilding process was more difficult than Maria had anticipated. Morrison required her to unlearn habits that had been effective for hunting, but were counterproductive for military applications. Maria spent extra hours on the range, working with Morrison to develop new muscle memory and breathing techniques specifically designed for combat scenarios. The other recruits began to notice Maria's extended training sessions. Some offered encouragement and support, recognizing her dedication and work ethic. Others questioned whether she belonged in the program, suggesting that her rural background had given her false confidence in abilities that weren't transferring to military requirements. The doubt from her fellow recruits was painful, but Maria found motivation in her grandfather's teachings about persistence and character. She remembered the stories he had shared about his own military training, the challenges he had faced, and the importance of never surrendering when pursuing something worthwhile. These memories helped her maintain focus during the most discouraging moments of her training. As weeks progressed, Maria's shooting improved dramatically. The extra hours of practice, combined with Morrison's expert instruction, began producing results that surprised even the experienced sergeant. Maria's natural hand-eye coordination, enhanced by proper technique and military-grade equipment, started generating groupings that were among the best in her training class. But the real breakthrough came during a night-firing exercise that tested the recruit's ability to engage targets under low-visibility conditions. Using night vision scopes and infrared targeting systems, the soldiers were required to hit targets at distances up to 600 meters while dealing with equipment they had never used before and environmental conditions that eliminated most visual reference points. Most of the recruits struggled with a night firing exercise, finding it difficult to adapt their daytime shooting techniques to equipment that required different skills and approaches. Maria, however, discovered that the darkness actually helped her focus. Without the distractions of a busy visual environment, she could concentrate entirely on the fundamental elements of marksmanship that Morrison had been drilling into the recruits for weeks. That night, Maria achieved something that caught the attention of everyone on the training range. She fired 20 rounds at targets positioned at various distances between 300 and 600 meters, and 19 of her shots were direct hits. The single miss was so close to the target center that it would have been considered an effective shot in any combat scenario. Sergeant Morrison's reaction to Maria's performance was uncharacteristic. Instead of her usual stern professionalism, Morrison actually smiled as she reviewed Maria's target results. She called Maria aside after the exercise and delivered feedback that would become one of the most important conversations of Maria's military career. "Santos, what you accomplished tonight was exceptional," Morrison said. "But more importantly, you demonstrated something that can't be taught: the ability to perform under pressure while adapting to new equipment and challenging conditions. That's the foundation of military marksmanship, and you've got it in abundance." Morrison went on to explain that Maria would be recommended for advanced marksmanship training upon completion of basic training. The advanced program was reserved for soldiers who demonstrated not just shooting ability, but the mental toughness and adaptability required for specialized missions. Only 12 soldiers from Maria's basic training company would be selected for the program, and competition for those positions was fierce. The news that she was being considered for advanced training provided Maria with renewed motivation for the remaining weeks of basic training. She attacked every challenge with increased intensity, whether it was physical conditioning, academic study, or practical exercises. Her fellow recruits noticed a change in her approach and began seeking her advice on shooting techniques and mental preparation for high-pressure situations. Maria's leadership qualities emerged naturally as she helped other recruits improve their marksmanship skills. She discovered that teaching others helped reinforce her own understanding of proper techniques, while building the kind of teamwork and camaraderie that Morrison emphasized as essential for military success. The final examination for basic training was a comprehensive test that combined all the skills the recruits had developed over their 3 months at Fort Benning. Physical fitness, academic knowledge, and practical applications were all evaluated through a series of challenging exercises designed to simulate real combat scenarios. For the marksmanship component of the final examination, recruits were required to engage targets at distances ranging from 100 to 800 meters using different weapons and shooting positions. They had to demonstrate proficiency with the M24 sniper rifle, standard infantry weapons, and handguns while dealing with time pressure and physical fatigue from earlier portions of the examination. Maria approached the final marksmanship test with confidence built through months of intensive training and Morrison's expert instruction. She had learned to trust her equipment, her technique, and, most importantly, her ability to perform under pressure. The lessons her grandfather had taught her about patience and precision had been enhanced by military training that emphasized speed and adaptability. When the final test results were announced, Maria had achieved scores that placed her among the top 5 performers in her entire basic training company. Her marksmanship scores were the highest recorded by any recruit in the program's experimental phase. More importantly, her overall performance had earned her the recommendation for advanced training that Morrison had promised weeks earlier. The graduation ceremony from basic training was attended by Maria's parents, who had traveled from Texas to witness their daughter's achievement. They were amazed by the confident, disciplined soldier who had emerged from the uncertain young woman who had left their ranch months earlier. Maria's transformation was evident not just in her physical conditioning, but in her bearing, her confidence, and her obvious mastery of skills they could barely comprehend. As Maria prepared to leave Fort Benning for the next phase of her military training, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The scared, uncertain recruit who had arrived months earlier had been replaced by a soldier who possessed both the technical skills and mental toughness required for advanced military service. But Maria also understood that her real challenges lay ahead. Advanced marksmanship training would demand even higher levels of performance, and The experimental nature of the program meant that she would be constantly proving herself in situations where failure could end her military career before it truly began. The foundation for her eventual legendary shot had been established during these months of basic training, but Maria couldn't have imagined the extraordinary circumstances that would test every lesson she had learned and push her abilities to limits that seemed impossible. Her journey toward that 4,000-meter shot was about to enter its most challenging phase. The helicopter touched down at the Advanced Marksmanship Training Center in a cloud of dust and deafening rotor noise that announced Maria's arrival at what she would later describe as the most challenging period of her life. The facility, located in the remote mountains of Colorado, was specifically designed for testing the absolute limits of human shooting capability under conditions that simulated the most extreme combat scenarios. Master Sergeant David "Hawkeye" Patterson waited on the landing zone, his weathered face showing no emotion as 12 carefully selected soldiers disembarked from the transport aircraft. Patterson was a legend in military marksmanship circles, holding multiple long-distance shooting records and having served as a sniper instructor for over 2 decades. He had volunteered to lead the experimental women's program despite skepticism from colleagues who questioned whether female soldiers could meet the physical and mental demands of advanced sniper training. "Welcome to what we call the Academy," Patterson announced once the helicopter had departed and silence returned to the mountain facility. "Over the next 6 months, you will be challenged in ways that will make your basic training feel like a pleasant vacation. Some of you will discover capabilities you never knew you possessed. Others will learn that advanced military service is not for everyone. Both outcomes are acceptable, as long as you give everything you have to the process." The Advanced Marksmanship Training Center was unlike any military facility Maria had previously experienced. The main building contained classrooms equipped with sophisticated computer simulation systems, laboratories for ballistics research, and workshops where soldiers learned to modify and maintain precision weapons. The shooting ranges extended across valleys and mountainsides, providing training scenarios at distances that stretched beyond 3 kilometers. Maria's fellow trainees represented the elite graduates from multiple basic training programs across the country. Several had college degrees in mathematics, physics, or engineering. Others came from military families with generations of service experience. A few had competed in Olympic-level shooting competitions before joining the military. Every soldier in the program had demonstrated exceptional marksmanship ability during basic training, making the competition for program completion intense and unforgiving. The daily routine at the academy began before dawn with physical training that was designed specifically to enhance the strength, endurance, and fine motor control required for precision shooting. The exercises included isometric holds to build muscle stability, breathing drills to improve oxygen control, and balance training that pushed the limits of human coordination. Master Sergeant Patterson explained that precision shooting at extreme distances required physical conditioning that went far beyond general military fitness. Soldiers needed the strength to carry heavy equipment across difficult terrain, the endurance to remain motionless for hours while waiting for the perfect shot, and the fine motor control to manipulate weapons systems with microscopic precision. The academic component of advanced training was equally demanding. Maria found herself studying subjects that seemed more appropriate for a physics graduate program than military training. Atmospheric conditions and their effects on bullet trajectory, advanced ballistics calculations, meteorology, and even astronomy for navigation and range estimation purposes. The mathematics were particularly challenging for Maria, who had received a solid but basic education in her rural high school. While her natural intelligence and determination helped her grasp the concepts, she struggled to keep pace with trainees who had studied advanced mathematics and physics in college. She spent her evenings working through complex equations while her classmates moved on to practical applications. Patterson noticed Maria's academic struggles during the 3rd week of training. Instead of offering to reduce her workload or suggesting that she might be better suited for a different military specialty, He assigned her additional tutoring with Dr. Sarah Chun, a civilian contractor who held a doctorate in applied physics and specialized in ballistics research. Dr. Chin's approach to teaching was patient and methodical, focusing on helping Maria understand the practical applications of mathematical concepts rather than simply memorizing formulas. She explained how atmospheric pressure affected bullet trajectory, how temperature variations influence powder burn rates, and how wind patterns at different altitudes could deflect projectiles by significant distances at extreme ranges. The mathematics aren't abstract concepts, Dr. Chin explained during one of their evening tutoring sessions. Every equation represents a real physical force that will affect your bullet's path. Understanding these forces gives you the power to compensate for them and achieve accuracy that seems impossible to soldiers who rely only on instinct and basic training. The breakthrough in Maria's understanding came during a practical exercise that combined classroom theory with live-fire application. The trainees were required to engage targets at 1,200 meters while dealing with crosswinds, temperature variations, and elevation changes that demanded precise mathematical calculations for shot placement. Most of the soldiers relied on sophisticated computer systems to calculate the necessary adjustments for environmental conditions. Maria, following Dr. Chin's instruction, performed the calculations manually using formulas she had struggled to understand just weeks earlier. When her shots consistently hit targets that others were missing, she finally grasped the connection between theoretical knowledge and practical application. Patterson observed Maria's improvement with the satisfaction of an instructor who recognized a student's moment of genuine understanding. He began pushing her toward increasingly challenging scenarios that tested not just her shooting ability, but her capacity to apply mathematical principles under pressure while dealing with equipment failures, time constraints, and simulated combat stress. The weapons training component of the program introduced Maria to equipment that represented the cutting edge of military technology. The primary rifle was a customized version of the M24 system that incorporated advanced optics, electronic range-finding capabilities, and ballistic computers that could automatically adjust for environmental conditions. The rifle was heavier and more complex than anything Maria had used during basic training, requiring weeks of practice to achieve proficiency with its sophisticated features. But Patterson also emphasized the importance of maintaining proficiency with simpler weapon systems. He explained that combat situations often involved equipment failures, ammunition shortages, or circumstances where soldiers had to use whatever weapons were available rather than their preferred systems. Technology fails. Patterson warned during a training session where the soldiers practiced with older, simpler rifles. Electronics break down, computers malfunction, and sophisticated optics get damaged. A truly skilled marksman can achieve exceptional results with basic equipment when the situation demands it. This philosophy proved prophetic during a training exercise that would become one of the most important experiences of Maria's military education. The scenario involved a simulated rescue mission where the trainees had to provide cover fire for extraction operation while using older weapon systems and dealing with multiple equipment failures. Maria was assigned a basic hunting rifle similar to the one her grandfather had taught her to use years earlier. The weapon lacked the advanced features she had become accustomed to during her months of training, forcing her to rely on fundamental marksmanship skills rather than technological assistance. The target was positioned at 800 meters, and she had to engage it while dealing with changing wind conditions and time pressure from the simulated combat scenario. The shot she made that day surprised everyone on the training range, including Patterson. Using basic equipment and manual calculations, Maria achieved a precision that exceeded what most soldiers accomplished with advanced systems. Her bullet struck the target center with an accuracy that demonstrated complete mastery of both technical knowledge and practical application. Patterson's reaction to Maria's performance marked a turning point in her training experience. He began working with her individually, sharing advanced techniques that he typically reserved for the most promising students in each training cycle. More importantly, he started discussing the possibility of Maria attempting the ultimate test of marksmanship capability, the 4,000-meter challenge. The 4,000-meter shot was considered legendary within military marksmanship circles. Only a handful of soldiers had ever attempted it during training exercises, and success was so rare that many experts considered it more a matter of luck than skill. The shot required not just exceptional marksmanship ability, but perfect environmental conditions, flawless equipment, and mathematical calculations accurate to several decimal places. Patterson explained that the shot would be attempted during the final week of training as an optional challenge for soldiers who had demonstrated exceptional capability throughout the program. Success would result in recognition within military marksmanship records and consideration for assignment to the military's most elite sniper units. Failure, while not penalized, would serve as a humbling reminder of the limits of human capability. As Maria's training progressed, her confidence grew steadily. She was consistently achieving results that exceeded program standards. Her academic performance had improved dramatically, and her leadership qualities were earning respect from fellow trainees who initially questioned whether she belonged in the program. But the pressure was also intensifying. The experimental nature of the women's program meant that every female trainee was being evaluated not just as an individual soldier, but as a representative of women's potential for military service in roles traditionally held by men. Media attention was increasing, with reporters and military officials frequently visiting the facility to observe the program's progress. Maria felt the weight of these expectations, but tried to focus on the lessons her grandfather had taught her about persistence and character. She reminded herself that she was training not just for personal achievement, but to prove that dedication and hard work could overcome any obstacle, regardless of gender or background. The final month of training brought the most challenging exercises of the entire program. The soldiers were required to demonstrate proficiency in all weather conditions, including scenarios that involved rain, snow, extreme heat, and high winds. They practiced shooting from unstable platforms that simulated real combat conditions where perfect positioning was impossible. The psychological pressure was equally intense. The trainees participated in exercises designed to test their ability to maintain accuracy while dealing with simulated combat stress, including loud noises, time pressure, and scenarios where missing the target would result in simulated casualties among friendly forces. Maria's performance during these final exercises was consistently exceptional, but she noticed that several of her fellow trainees were struggling with the cumulative pressure of 6 months of intensive training. The program's attrition rate was climbing as soldiers voluntarily withdrew or were removed for failing to meet standards. As the date for the final examination approached, Patterson announced that 3 soldiers, including Maria, had qualified to attempt the 4,000-meter challenge shot. The announcement generated excitement throughout the facility, as even the instructors recognized that they were about to witness an attempt at something that pushed the absolute boundaries of human marksmanship capability. Maria's preparation for the challenge shot involved weeks of additional training focused specifically on extreme distance shooting. She studied weather patterns, practiced with different ammunition types, and worked with Dr. Chund to perfect the mathematical calculations required for accurate shot placement at such an extraordinary distance. But despite all her preparation and the confidence she had built throughout the training program, Maria had no way to predict what would actually happen when she stepped up to attempt the legendary shot. The 11 failures that would nearly crush her spirit were still ahead of her, as was the moment of triumph that would establish her as one of the greatest marksmen in military history. The foundation for that historic achievement had been built through 6 months of the most challenging training imaginable, but the true test of her character and capability was still to come. The morning of the 4,000-meter challenge dawned clear and still, with visibility that stretched across the Colorado mountains like a crystal lens. Maria stood at the edge of the advanced training facility's longest range, looking out toward a target that was barely visible even through high-powered binoculars. At that distance, the target appeared smaller than a pinhead, a seemingly impossible mark for any weapon to reach with precision. General Patricia Williams had arrived the previous evening to observe the challenge attempts. Williams was a three-star general who commanded the Army's Special Operations Forces and had been instrumental in developing the experimental women's training program. Her presence at the facility indicated the significance of what was about to unfold, not just for the individual soldiers involved, but for the future of women in combat roles. Master Sergeant Patterson gathered the 3 qualifying soldiers for a final briefing about the challenge parameters. The target was positioned at exactly 4,000 meters from the firing position, verified by laser range-finding equipment and GPS coordinates. Each soldier would be allowed 12 attempts, using identical weapons and ammunition to ensure fairness. Environmental conditions would be monitored throughout the exercise to account for any changes that might affect bullet trajectory. "Ladies and gentlemen," Patterson announced, "what you are about to attempt is considered by many experts to be at the absolute limit of human marksmanship capability. The mathematics alone are staggering. At this distance, your bullet will travel for approximately 6.2 seconds before reaching the target. During that time, it will drop approximately 800 inches due to gravity and can be deflected by wind conditions that are imperceptible at the firing position." Maria listened to Patterson's briefing while mentally reviewing the calculations she had practiced for weeks. The ballistic trajectory required precise compensation for altitude, atmospheric pressure, temperature, humidity, and the Coriolis effect caused by the Earth's rotation. Even with perfect conditions and flawless equipment, success would require shot placement accurate to within a few inches across a distance of nearly 2.5 miles. The first soldier to attempt the challenge was Lieutenant Rebecca Chun, Dr. Sarah Chen's niece, and a former Olympic shooting competitor who had joined the military to test her skills in more challenging environments. Chen approached the firing position with the confident precision that had made her a world-class competitor, methodically adjusting her equipment and taking extensive measurements of environmental conditions. Chen's first shot was impressive, striking approximately 18 inches from the target center. Her subsequent attempts demonstrated remarkable consistency, with most shots landing within a 2-foot radius of the target. But consistency at near-miss distances wasn't enough to achieve the precision required for success. After 10 attempts, Chen's closest shot had missed the target center by 14 inches, an achievement that would have been exceptional at shorter distances, but wasn't sufficient for the 4,000-meter challenge. Chen's final 2 shots were affected by a slight wind change that shifted her impacts further from the target center. She completed her 12 attempts with obvious frustration, despite having demonstrated shooting ability that exceeded anything most soldiers could achieve at such an extraordinary distance. The second challenger was Staff Sergeant Michael Torres, a former Marine sniper who had transferred to the Army specifically to participate in the advanced training program. Torres had set multiple long-distance shooting records during his Marine service and was considered by many observers to be the most likely candidate for success. Torres took a different approach than Chun, spending nearly 30 minutes studying environmental conditions and making minute adjustments to his rifle scope settings. His preparation was methodical and thorough, reflecting years of experience with precision shooting under challenging conditions. Torres's first shot struck 22 inches from target center, a result that would have been exceptional for most soldiers, but represented a disappointing start for someone of his caliber. His second attempt was closer, missing by only 10 inches, generating excitement among the observers who recognized they were witnessing remarkable marksmanship. But Torres's subsequent shots demonstrated the cruel nature of extreme distance shooting. Minor variations in environmental conditions, ammunition characteristics, or shooting technique resulted in impacts that varied widely despite his consistent approach. By his 8th attempt, Torres had achieved several close misses but hadn't managed to hit the target center with the precision required for success. Torres's final 4 shots showed signs of the pressure and frustration that extreme distance shooting can create in even the most experienced marksman. His technique remained sound, but the psychological burden of repeated near misses began affecting his performance. His 12th shot missed the target entirely, a result that stunned everyone present and left Torres visibly shaken by his performance. As Maria prepared for her turn at the 4,000-meter challenge, she watched Torres walk away from the firing position with the dejected expression of a soldier who had given everything he had and come up short. The pressure she felt was enormous, intensified by the knowledge that General Williams and other military officials were evaluating not just her individual performance, but the potential for women to succeed in roles that had traditionally been limited to men. Maria's pre-shot routine was based on techniques her grandfather had taught her years earlier, modified by months of advanced military training. She began by spending several minutes observing environmental conditions, not just at her firing position, but at various points along the bullet's trajectory path. She studied wind patterns indicated by vegetation movement, temperature variations suggested by atmospheric distortion, and other subtle environmental clues that could affect bullet flight. Her equipment preparation was thorough, but not rushed. Maria had learned that excessive preparation could create anxiety that negatively affected performance, while insufficient preparation almost guaranteed failure at extreme distances. She checked her rifle zero, verified her scope settings, and confirmed that her ammunition was properly prepared for the environmental conditions. Maria's first shot felt perfect as she squeezed the trigger with a smooth, controlled pressure that had become second nature through months of practice. The rifle's recoil was familiar and comfortable, and her follow-through was textbook perfect. Through her scope, she watched the bullet's vapor trail arc across the valley toward the distant target, a graceful curve that seemed to promise success. The impact was 26 inches from target center. The miss was devastating, not because it was poor shooting by any reasonable standard, but because Maria had expected better results based on her preparation and the quality of her shot execution. The bullet had traveled nearly 4,000 meters with remarkable precision, but precision at such distances required accuracy measured in single digits of inches rather than dozens. Maria's second attempt incorporated adjustments based on her first shot's impact point. She modified her scope settings to compensate for the observed trajectory and took additional time to ensure perfect body position and breathing control. Her trigger squeeze was smooth and controlled, her follow-through was flawless, and her confidence remained high. The second shot missed by 19 inches. The third shot, despite Maria's growing anxiety about her performance, was technically excellent. Her shooting position was stable, her breathing was controlled, and her trigger manipulation was perfect. The shot felt identical to practice rounds that had achieved outstanding results during training exercises. But at 4,000 meters, factors beyond a shooter's control began to dominate the equation. The third shot missed by 23 inches. By her fourth attempt, Maria could feel doubt creeping into her mind. The shots were consistent in quality, but inconsistent in results, suggesting that environmental factors or equipment variables were affecting her bullet's trajectory in ways that her calculations hadn't anticipated. She tried to maintain the mental discipline that Patterson and her other instructors had emphasized, focusing on process rather than results. The fourth shot missed by 15 inches, her closest attempt yet, but still not sufficient for success. Maria's fifth and sixth attempts showed the effects of mounting pressure and frustration. Despite her efforts to maintain technical consistency, subtle changes in her shooting position and breathing rhythm began affecting her performance. The shots remained within acceptable parameters for normal training exercises, but they weren't achieving the microscopic precision required for the 4,000-meter challenge. Shot 5 missed by 28 inches. Shot 6 missed by 21 inches. The seventh attempt was Maria's best technical shot of the day. Everything felt perfect. Her position was rock solid, her breathing was perfectly controlled, her sight alignment was flawless, and her trigger squeeze was smooth and straight. The shot broke with the crisp precision that indicated perfect technique, and Maria was confident she had finally achieved the accuracy required for success. The impact was 31 inches from target center, her worst result of the day. The eighth shot demonstrated the psychological challenge of extreme distance shooting. Despite her determination to maintain focus, Maria could feel her confidence eroding with each unsuccessful attempt. The technical aspects of her shooting remained sound, but the mental game was becoming increasingly difficult as the pressure of repeated failures accumulated. Shot 8 missed by 17 inches. Maria's ninth attempt was affected by a subtle change in wind conditions that she detected too late to make proper adjustments. The bullet's trajectory was deflected by crosswinds that hadn't been present during her earlier attempts, resulting in an impact that was significantly off-target despite technically sound shot execution. The ninth shot missed by 35 inches. By her 10th attempt, Maria was fighting to control emotions that threatened to overwhelm her technical training. She could feel the eyes of General Williams, Master Sergeant Patterson, and the other observers watching her struggle with a challenge that was proving to be beyond her capabilities. The weight of representing women's potential in military combat roles added psychological pressure that made concentration increasingly difficult. Shot 10 missed by 24 inches. The 11th attempt was Maria's last chance to achieve a result that would demonstrate progress and maintain some measure of dignity in what had become a very public struggle. She took extra time with her preparation, double-checked all her calculations, and tried to recapture the confidence and technical precision that had brought her to this moment. Maria's 11th shot was technically perfect in every measurable way. Her body position was ideal, her breathing was controlled, her sight picture was flawless, and her trigger squeeze was straight and smooth. The shot felt like success as it broke, and Maria was certain she had finally achieved the precision required for the 4,000-meter challenge. The impact was 29 inches from target center. As Maria prepared for her 12th and final attempt, the silence around the firing position was heavy with disappointment and tension. 11 consecutive failures had created an atmosphere of inevitability that suggested the 4,000-meter challenge might indeed be beyond the reach of current human marksmanship capability. General Williams approached the firing position during Maria's preparation for her final shot. Instead of offering encouragement or pressure, the general simply said, "Soldier, regardless of what happens with this last shot, you have demonstrated exceptional skill and determination today. The failures don't define you. How you handle this final attempt will." Maria nodded at the general's words and turned her attention back to the distant target. She had one shot remaining to salvage something from a day that had begun with such promise and deteriorated into a series of heartbreaking near misses. Everything she had worked for, everything her family was counting on, and everything the experimental women's program represented seemed to hang in the balance of her final attempt. What happened next would either complete a day of failure that might end her military career or demonstrate that sometimes the greatest achievements come after the most devastating setbacks. Maria had no way of knowing that her 12th shot would become the stuff of military legend and redefine what experts believed was humanly possible at extreme distances. The target waited in the distance, as impossible and challenging as it had been for her first 11 attempts. But Maria Santos, the small-town girl who had refused to accept limitations others tried to place on her, was about to discover what she was truly capable of when everything seemed lost. Maria stood behind the firing line with her rifle in her hands, feeling the weight of 11 failures pressing down on her shoulders like a physical burden. The silence around the observation area was deafening, broken only by the occasional whisper of whine through the mountain vegetation and the distant sound of equipment being adjusted by the range safety officers who were preparing to conclude the exercise. General Williams remained near the firing position, but she had stepped back to give Maria the space and solitude needed for her final attempt. The general's presence was both comforting and intimidating, representing not just military authority but the hopes and expectations of everyone who believed that women could excel in any military role when given the proper opportunity and training. Master Sergeant Patterson approached Maria with an expression that combined professional assessment with genuine concern for one of his most dedicated students. He had watched 11 technically excellent shots fail to achieve the microscopic precision required for success at 4,000 meters, and he understood the psychological impact of repeated failures on even the most resilient soldier. "Santos," Patterson said quietly, "I want you to forget about everything that happened with your previous shots. Each attempt was a learning experience, but this shot exists independently of what came before. You have demonstrated exceptional ability throughout your training, and that ability hasn't disappeared because of today's challenges." Patterson's words were meant to be encouraging, but Maria could see the doubt in his eyes. He had witnessed many soldiers attempt the 4,000-meter challenge over his years as an instructor, and he had never seen anyone succeed after 11 consecutive failures. The psychological burden of repeated near misses typically created a spiral of declining performance that made success increasingly unlikely. Maria nodded at Patterson's advice and turned her attention back to the distant target. At 4,000 meters, the target remained essentially invisible to the naked eye, existing more as a mathematical concept than a visual reference point. The scope's magnification brought it into view as a small circle that seemed to dance and shimmer in the atmospheric distortion created by temperature variations across nearly 2.5 miles of mountain terrain. As Maria began her preparation for the final shot, something fundamental shifted in her mental approach. Instead of focusing on the pressure, the expectations, and the previous failures, she found herself remembering her grandfather's teachings about patience, persistence, and the importance of maintaining faith in yourself when everything seems to be going wrong. She remembered an afternoon from her childhood when she had been struggling to hit tin cans with stones, missing target after target, while growing increasingly frustrated with her performance. Her grandfather had watched her growing anger for several minutes before offering advice that she was only now beginning to truly understand. "Maria," he had said that day, "the targets haven't changed, and your ability hasn't disappeared. What's changed is that you're fighting yourself instead of focusing on what you need to do. Stop thinking about the misses and start thinking about the next throw." Standing at the 4,000-meter firing line with her 12th and final chance to succeed, Maria realized that she had been fighting herself for 11 shots instead of focusing on the fundamental techniques that had brought her to this moment. The pressure and expectations had created mental interference that was affecting her performance in subtle but significant ways. Maria decided to approach her final shot differently. Instead of treating it as her last chance to salvage success from a day of failure, she would treat it as simply another opportunity to execute the techniques she had mastered through months of intensive training. The target remained the same. Her rifle remained the same. Her ability remained the same. What needed to change was her mental approach to the challenge. She began her preparation by spending 5 minutes in complete mental stillness, not thinking about calculations or wind conditions or equipment settings, but simply allowing her mind to achieve the calm focus that her grandfather had taught her during their hunting expeditions years earlier. This mental preparation was something she had abandoned during her previous attempts in favor of more analytical approaches, but she now recognized that extreme distance shooting required both technical precision and mental tranquility. When Maria opened her eyes and looked toward the distant target, something had changed in her perception. The pressure and anxiety that had characterized her previous attempts had been replaced by a sense of calm determination that felt familiar and comfortable. She was no longer fighting to prove something to the observers or to justify the military's investment in her training. She was simply preparing to execute a shot with the same focused attention she had given to countless practice sessions. Maria's equipment check was thorough but relaxed. She verified her rifle's 0 and scope settings without the anxious urgency that had characterized her earlier attempts. Her ammunition inspection was careful and methodical, ensuring that the cartridge she selected met all specifications for weight, dimensions, and preparation. Most importantly, she allowed herself to trust the equipment and training that had brought her to this moment instead of second-guessing every detail. The environmental assessment that preceded her final shot was based on observation skills that Maria had developed during years of outdoor work on her family's ranch, enhanced by months of military training in advanced marksmanship techniques. She studied wind patterns at multiple distances along the bullet's trajectory, not just at her firing position, but at intermediate points where atmospheric conditions might affect bullet flight. Maria noticed that the wind conditions had stabilized during the time she had spent preparing for her final shot. The variable crosswinds that had affected several of her earlier attempts had calmed to a steady, predictable pattern that could be accurately calculated and compensated for through scope adjustments. The atmospheric conditions were as close to ideal as could be expected for extreme distance shooting. Her body position for the final shot was established with the careful attention to detail that had been drilled into her through months of training, but without the excessive tension that pressure had created during her previous attempts. Maria's prone position was stable and comfortable, her rifle rest was properly adjusted, and her body alignment was perfect for maintaining consistency throughout the shooting sequence. The breathing sequence that preceded her final shot was based on techniques Patterson had taught her for managing physiological stress during high-pressure situations. Instead of trying to force perfect breath control, Maria allowed her breathing to settle into its natural rhythm and then timed her shot to coincide with the optimal moment in her respiratory cycle. As Maria settled behind her rifle for the final time, she felt a sense of clarity and focus that had been absent during her previous attempts. The mathematical calculations for trajectory compensation felt natural and intuitive rather than forced and analytical. The wind compensation adjustments seemed obvious rather than uncertain. Most importantly, her confidence in her ability to execute the shot was based on realistic assessment of her skills rather than hope or desperation. Maria's sight picture for the final shot was perfect in every measurable way. The target appeared centered in her scope's reticle with the precise alignment that indicated proper aim point. Her rifle was rock steady against its rest, with no tremor or movement that might affect accuracy. Her trigger finger was positioned correctly for a straight, smooth squeeze that would break the shot without disturbing the rifle's aim. The trigger squeeze that would determine the outcome of Maria's 4,000-meter challenge was executed with the same smooth precision that had characterized thousands of practice shots during her training. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing, no attempt to force a perfect result. The shot broke naturally when all conditions were optimal, just as her training had taught her to expect. The recoil felt different from her previous attempts, not because the rifle performed differently, but because Maria's body position and mental state allowed her to manage it with complete control. Her follow-through was textbook perfect, maintaining sight picture and rifle position until the bullet had completely left the barrel and begun its long journey toward the distant target. Through her scope, Maria watched the bullet's vapor trail arc across the Colorado Valley with a trajectory that seemed different from her previous attempts. The graceful curve appeared more stable, more predictable, more precisely aligned with a calculated flight path that would carry it to the target center. The flight time for a bullet traveling 4,000 meters seemed endless as Maria maintained her shooting position and watched through the scope for impact indication. 6.2 seconds stretched like an eternity while the bullet traveled through atmospheric conditions that could deflect it by significant distances despite perfect initial trajectory. The impact, when it came, was visible through Maria's scope as a small puff of debris from the target area. For a moment, Maria couldn't determine exactly where the bullet had struck, and she felt the familiar sinking feeling that had characterized her previous 11 attempts. Then, Master Sergeant Patterson's voice cut through the mountain silence with words that would become part of military marksmanship legend. Target center, direct hit. Santos has achieved a perfect 4,000-meter shot. The silence that followed Patterson's announcement lasted for several seconds as observers processed what had just happened. Then, General Williams began applauding, and the sound was taken up by everyone present until the mountain air rang with applause and cheers that celebrated not just Maria's achievement, but the validation of everything the experimental women's program represented. Maria remained in her shooting position for a moment longer, scarcely able to believe that her 12th shot had accomplished what her previous 11 attempts had failed to achieve. The target confirmation came through the range communication system as spotters at the 4,000-meter line reported that the bullet had struck within 2 inches of the target's exact center, easily meeting the precision requirements for challenge success. General Williams was the first to reach Maria as she finally rose from her shooting position. The general's congratulations were delivered with a professional demeanor appropriate for military protocol, but her enthusiasm was unmistakable as she shook Maria's hand and delivered words that would be remembered for years afterward. "Santos, what you have accomplished today represents more than exceptional marksmanship," General Williams said. "You have demonstrated that determination, proper training, and refusal to surrender can overcome any obstacle. Your achievement will be remembered as a milestone in military history." The celebration that followed Maria's successful shot was subdued but deeply meaningful. Master Sergeant Patterson presented her with a certificate documenting her achievement, making her officially the first woman to successfully complete the 4,000-meter marksmanship challenge and only the third soldier in the program's history to achieve success at that distance. Dr. Sarah Chun approached Maria during the celebration with a smile that reflected both personal pride and professional validation. "Maria, your success today validates everything we believed about the relationship between technical knowledge and practical application. You didn't just make a lucky shot. You've demonstrated complete mastery of every factor that affects precision shooting at extreme distances." As Maria reflected on the day's events, she realized that her 11 failures had been as important to her ultimate success as the perfect 12th shot. Each miss had provided information about environmental conditions, equipment performance, and her own shooting technique that contributed to the perfect execution of her final attempt. The news of Maria's achievement spread quickly through military marksmanship communities and beyond. Her success became symbolic of the broader changes taking place in military service as barriers were removed and opportunities were extended to anyone capable of meeting performance standards regardless of gender or background. For Maria personally, the 4,000-meter shot represented the culmination of a journey that had begun with a desperate need to help her family and had evolved into a demonstration of what was possible when natural ability was combined with intensive training and unwavering determination. She had proven to herself and to the military that excellence was not limited by traditional expectations or conventional wisdom. The small-town girl who had arrived at basic training uncertain of her place in the military world had become a soldier whose achievement would be studied and celebrated for years to come. Her story had become proof that extraordinary accomplishments were possible for anyone willing to persist through failure and maintain faith in their ultimate potential for success. Maria's journey was far from over, but the foundation had been established for a military career that would continue to break barriers and set new standards for what was considered possible. The 4,000-meter shot had made her a legend, but more importantly, it had proven that legends could emerge from the most unlikely backgrounds when talent met opportunity and determination refused to accept defeat.